to have this shared vision of what we're gonna make. And, so sometimes, during this process,
Life has never been just one thing. It's everything happening at once. Every emotion, every choice, every hidden motive colliding beneath the surface. It all started with a seemingly ordinary text message. "We need you in Dallas this weekend. I'll take you there now. Please, if you could just come." But in Hollywood, nothing is ever ordinary. One text turned into two PR machines spinning in opposite directions, and before anyone could take a breath, a single date on the calendar ignited a full-scale industry firestorm. Suddenly, the kind of chaos usually reserved for movie plots spilled into real life. A collision of lawyers, journalists, and publicists, all fighting to control a story that no tabloid line or studio statement could contain. What began as whispers quickly became front-page headlines, pulling Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and Wayfair Studios into a whirlwind of legal filings, sealed documents, and media strategies designed to shape perception. Behind the scenes, phone calls were made in hushed tones, NDAs were reviewed, and crisis teams worked overtime to prevent one mistake from becoming the next viral scandal. The media narrative moved faster than the truth could catch up. And while attorneys fought to define what counted as evidence, a quiet winter cutoff date drew the invisible line between what the judge would officially consider and what the public would endlessly repeat and distort online. Okay, breaking Blake and Baldoni news, a producer's voice crackled during a late-night recording. Remember the Daily Mail reporter James Batusa? He's the one. That single name triggered a ripple effect through every newsroom and PR office in Los Angeles. From that point forward, crossing the line meant rewriting the narrative. Staying behind it meant letting crucial facts disappear into silence. This wasn't the usual Hollywood fandom drama. It was a living timeline with real consequences, a trail of receipts, internal emails, and PR maneuvers that exposed just how high the stakes truly were. And then came the turning point, the moment everything shifted from rumor to record. It didn't start with a headline or a leak, but with a winter filing that would forever change the conversation. In late December, Blake Lively's legal team quietly submitted their claims to a state agency, attaching documents that carried an undeniable timestamp. Overnight, what had been dismissed as gossip became an official case number, forcing every journalist, executive, and fan to reconsider what they thought they knew. It was no longer about image or speculation. It was about proof. And in that instant, Hollywood realized that even its most carefully crafted illusions could come undone with a single signature. Oh my God, that date became more than a mark on a calendar. It became a fracture point, a quiet but unshakable dividing line in a Hollywood story spinning wildly out of control. On one side lay months of whispers, private texts, on-set gossip, and confidential PR emails that had long fueled speculation but never quite crossed into public record. On the other side, everything that surfaced after the official filing became a matter of contention, off-limits to some, crucial evidence to others. That single filing didn't just start a case. It redrew the map of who controlled the narrative. Justin Baldoni and Wayfair Studios moved quickly, denying the allegations and insisting that their reputations and livelihoods were on the line. Blake Lively's team countered, presenting the filing as a necessary overdue act of accountability. Each side claimed to be telling the truth, and neither seemed willing to back down. What began as a quiet winter line turned into the defining reference point of the entire saga, the moment everyone began measuring everything else against. Lawyers dissected every document in its shadow. PR teams crafted new talking points to spin its implications. Fans online began time-stamping screenshots, drawing digital timelines that divided every text, post, and leak into before and after. Because in this world, the courts don't decide stories, they decide what counts. And in that reality, an email sent on December 21st could mean something entirely different than one sent just a day before. One text quoted out of context became the internet's favorite smoking gun, while in court it was little more than a line of punctuation in a much larger story. "You guys, she's getting smacked down," one blogger posted after a partial ruling leaked. They tried to pull this, but perception had already outrun fact. The filings multiplied. Each side dug deeper. one fighting to preserve their name and business, the other determined to prove a pattern of conduct. Then came a secondary blow, a separate media lawsuit that only amplified the noise. For weeks, it seemed like every day brought a new twist. New claims, new forums, fresh press releases, as if the entire industry were holding its breath, waiting for the next revelation. Then came another shockwave. So Jenny Slate's HR complaint to Sony has just been revealed by The Hollywood Reporter. Someone announced midstream, pulling attention from one scandal to another. In the middle of all this, a federal judge quietly trimmed the script, literally. Portions of the defamation claims were dismissed, narrowing the battlefield. It wasn't about who the internet declared the winner. It was about what the law could prove. The court's ruling left only the sharpest disputes intact: contracts, privileges, and the boundaries of what could or could not be compelled from social media platforms. Outside the courthouse, "Case dismissed" became a viral headline, misread by millions as "case over." Inside, it meant something much smaller but far more significant: that certain claims wouldn't proceed as pleaded. The reputational war continued to rage in public while the legal fight grew smaller, more technical, more precise. And through it all, one short text, typed too fast, regretted too late, became the symbol of everything. To some, it was evidence. To others, just punctuation. But to the lawyers, it was Exhibit A, frozen forever in screenshots and filings, a single message that outlived the moment it was written, yet never captured the whole story. By the time Judge Lyman issued an order on Wayfair's motion for alteration, the courtroom had become less about justice and more about endurance. Who could hold their story together the longest while the world outside tore it apart? Overnight, the PR team circled the quote in red, transforming a single phrase into a Rorschach test. Lively's side saw vindication. Baldoni's side called it a misquote. And the internet, as always, interpreted it through whatever lens fit the narrative they'd already chosen. The wording sounded definitive, but it existed within a longer exchange few people ever saw. Context trimmed, dates debated, meaning divided. One camp claimed it exposed a carefully spun story. The other insisted it proved nothing without the full thread, the timing, and who spoke when. That's how her house of lies began to crumble. Because that's the trap with receipts. Screenshots feel like truth until a judge asks what lies outside the frame. While that one line dominated trending charts, the courtroom quietly pared down claims and pushed the case forward. Yet online, the text kept breathing. Exhibit A in the court of public opinion, just as PR professionals stepped out from the shadows. As lawyers argued points of law, publicists crafted narratives. The moment new filings dropped, two communications machines roared to life, each working to control the atmosphere around the story. Then Ryan Reynolds skipped the Golden Globes. His absence was noticed, his silence analyzed. Meanwhile, background. Briefings, emails, curated statements, and conveniently timed screenshots flooded social media, each one fueling the battle. One side called it setting the record straight. The other, narrative manipulation. The quiet truth about reputation wars is that they rarely explode with a single piece of proof. They unfold slowly, through selective timestamps, clipped subject, lines and missing paragraphs that can turn a sentence damning or flip its meaning entirely. And that's why James Fitsuka's declaration landed like a spark today. The courtroom may revolve around precision and immobility, but the internet thrives on interpretation and chaos. Two very different arenas, both fiercely played. PR operatives have become characters in their own drama, and what began as a communications dispute has evolved into a full-blown storyline. Allegations of smears clashing with counterclaims of truth-telling, each side convinced the other has gone too far. While the docket methodically trimmed anything that couldn't stand on its own, headlines screamed "exposed" as judges quietly asked, "Is it evidence?" What began as James Fitsuka's correction of record filing spiraled into yet another chapter of a saga that refused to stay confined to the courtroom. Just when the battle looked like pure PR chess, Discovery shifted the board. A supporting actress was suddenly pulled into the spotlight, Not for what she said on screen, but because her inbox now mattered. The subpoena didn't target a headliner, but her, turning what should have been a routine discovery request into a flashpoint. What one side dismissed as standard legal procedure, the other painted as a heavy-handed intimidation move. Same document, two interpretations, proof of how quickly truth fractures once a name appears in a caption, and every DM becomes a potential clue. Who emailed first? Who replied? And which version of events was shared privately versus publicly? Suddenly, the case wasn't about performance anymore. It was about metadata. Every message, every timestamp, every fragment of context feeding competing narratives. Both sides accused each other of smearing and spinning, and by the time the dust settled, the audience was left watching reputations unravel in real time. For those following along from home, this was the unglamorous machinery of major cases. Not fiery speeches, but timestamp audits, relevance arguments, and motions to compel. Courts dissect what's fair to request and what's off limits. Too broad, it's struck. Too vague, it's dismissed. Legitimate, it stands. And outside those walls, optics take over. A young actor, dragged into a dispute she never started, became an instant headline, exactly as the judges began clearing the docket of noise. James Fatusa's name lingered across blogs and TikTok captions, with speculations swirling over whether he'd been fired or reassigned. Inside, though, the court pressed forward. The bench, not the feeds, made the next move. Away from the trending chaos, the case began to narrow. The court didn't choose a side. It set a standard. Defamation counts were trimmed, not because the story was over, but because the pleadings didn't meet the legal bar. What remained were quieter, drier questions about contracts, privilege, and discoverability. Yet outside, headlines shouted, "Case over," as if the ruling were final. In truth, the docket merely said, "These claims as written don't proceed." But procedural clarity doesn't translate well online. Every motion filed, every red line edited, became a new misunderstanding. What the court intended as order only deepened confusion, and what was once a legal case had fully transformed into a narrative war. A deposition pulled from the public docket wasn't a verdict, and a barred letter wasn't a scandal. It was about timing, not drama. Judges were focused on lanes, admissibility, proper filings, and the specific dates that defined the limits of discovery. That winter cutoff became a dividing line. On one side, material still open to legal debate. On the other, evidence deemed off-limits. The same emails and texts could either be central exhibits or legally irrelevant, depending entirely on when they were sent. Then came the messy details: privilege logs, clawbacks, protective orders. What looked explosive online often arrived in court, redacted, reframed, or excluded entirely. A single text that felt like a gotcha moment on social media might be just one muted tile in a mosaic the jury never even sees. The internet trades in virality, the courtroom trades in rules. Amid all this, whispers surfaced that the Daily Mail could face its own trouble, possibly being sued by former journalist James Fatusa, who had signed a sworn affidavit tied to the case. Even as the legal scope narrowed, the stage outside the courthouse expanded. New projects, quiet statements, shifting alliances, all of it fed perception, and perception was the real currency. Courtrooms enforce order. The outside world sets tone. While lawyers argued over privilege and dates, the public decoded signals. A casting announcement here, a quiet unfollow there, a carefully scripted no comment that somehow spoke volumes. By August 10th, Blake Lively's viral interview had already stirred the conversation again. Within days, a new project announcement reframed her as resilient, a comeback in motion. A week later, an old clip resurfaced, flipping the narrative back. Emotion wasn't dictated, but the mood shifted constantly, shaped by Premier's brand. Posts, paparazzi sightings, and friendly cameos that felt like silent endorsements. In this ecosystem, silence becomes a statement, and timing becomes a tell. The feedback loop is relentless. Clips get cropped, captions sharpened, and every gesture becomes an interpretation. Both camps understand the rhythm. One leans on, keep working, keep winning. The other on, stay focused, stay grounded. Each move feels like proof, until 2 months later, a judge cuts the context in half. That gap between what trends and what legally counts is where most people form their opinions. It's also why the real ending won't look like a viral bombshell. It'll look like paperwork. Because in truth, these battles don't end with dramatic verdicts. They fade through calendars, settlement schedules, and procedural deadlines that quietly decide leverage. The discovery war now centers on what's privileged, relevant, and fits inside that winter cutoff. Proof that the most important twists rarely happen on social media, but in the silence of sealed filings. Either the emails get unlocked or sealed away forever. Once key threads are excluded, the loudest online receipts lose their bite, while the few that make it through spark new filings and frantic narrative shifts, long before a jury ever sees them. Whispers began to circulate that Blake Lively wasn't invited to Taylor Swift's private pre-album dinner, fueling speculation about shifting alliances. Then came the real pressure points. Judges set briefing schedules, lawyers filed targeted motions, and summary judgment loomed like a storm on the horizon. Claims that couldn't meet the legal threshold were trimmed or dismissed, narrowing the case before trial and turning settlement talks from abstract ideas into mathematical equations. Less about truth, more about risk, cost, and the consequences of dragging the fight into another year. Meanwhile, reputations moved on a separate track. New roles, brand partnerships, and social moments continued shaping public perception, even as the legal world froze in procedure. With rumors of Taylor's new songs referencing her, Lively's next move seemed as much strategic as emotional. While the court sifted through footnotes, both sides weighed every motion against potential exposure. One unfavorable